My name is Dana, 32 years old. And a week ago, the wealth I'd quietly accumulated funding my parents' lifestyle would become my greatest burden. The fortune I'd painstakingly built, working 80-hour weeks, sacrificing sleep and missing countless birthdays, became the center of a storm at our Sunday dinner when my parents demanded I start covering my younger brother Nolan's gambling debts. My refusal earned me explosive condemnation from my mother, whose sharp voice echoed off the dining room walls like artillery fire. "You're selfish and cruel," she snapped, tears streaming theatrically down her face as my father stared at me with eyes hardened by disappointment. Nolan slumped smugly beside her, feigning shame, while my cousins and aunts shifted uncomfortably, pretending to examine their plates. I didn't cry or tremble as they expected. Instead, the sheer audacity of their entitlement ignited something deep and defiant within me. My quiet, lifelong role as their financial safety net had ended, and my silent compliance fractured under the pressure of their disdainful gaze. My refusal would set off a chain reaction of truths and confrontations, shattering the facade we'd maintained for years. I knew, in that searing moment of accusation and blame, that nothing would ever be the same. But before I tell you how the very dinner meant to tear me apart turned into the night of reckoning for my entire family, let me know where you're watching from, and hit subscribe if you've ever overcome something huge for your family, because you have no idea what they'll do once the ATM stops dispensing cash. I grew up feeling like the invisible member of my family. Even as a child, my achievements were overshadowed by Nolan's minor successes. When I won first prize at the state science fair for my project on financial forecasting, my parents didn't even show up. They'd been busy at Nolan's junior basketball game, cheering him on from the sidelines, even though he barely played 5 minutes. My ribbon lay crumpled at the bottom of my backpack for days, its creases a quiet testament to my unspoken hurt. In high school, I made honor roll every semester and was accepted early into a prestigious university, but my parents merely nodded distractedly when I shared the news. That same evening, Nolan proudly announced he'd scraped a C+ on a biology test. Mom practically burst into applause, beaming at him as if he'd cured cancer. "See, honey," she gushed, "I knew you'd get there with just a little effort." I became an expert in silent disappointment. My victories were minimized to mere footnotes while my setbacks became magnified failures, proof to my parents that I wasn't doing enough. When Nolan dropped out of community college after 1 semester, my parents immediately blamed me for not helping him more. Somehow his laziness was my responsibility, just another shortcoming of mine to fix. As adulthood loomed, the cycle continued. While Nolan drifted from failed job to failed job, my career quietly flourished in finance. Promotions, bonuses, and major career milestones came and went, always unnoticed by my family. My parents, meanwhile, drained my bank account behind the scenes, comfortably ensconced in the lavish lifestyle my efforts provided. It felt as though my entire existence had become reduced to 2 functions: silently funding their endless demands and quietly enduring their relentless critiques. I became skilled at hiding my frustration beneath smiles and nods, but each overlooked accomplishment hardened a part of me, transforming me from daughter and sister into something colder and more detached. Still, deep inside, I longed desperately for their approval, even if just once. But none of that mattered last Sunday night. That dinner was the reckoning I'd spent my entire life preparing for. I just didn't know it yet. My life changed quietly, in the dim glow of late-night laptop screens fueled by coffee and stubborn determination. I vividly remember my aha moment. I'd been passed over for yet another promotion at the financial firm where I'd poured every ounce of my soul, watching less qualified colleagues breeze past me simply because they were louder, flashier, more noticed. That night, I decided if my employers couldn't see my value, I'd make them regret overlooking me. But first, I'd prove it to myself. So I dove into building my own financial consulting business, a quiet rebellion constructed from spreadsheets, strategies, and secret ambition. Days turned into sleepless weeks as I navigated client calls in hushed tones during lunch breaks, sketched business plans on subway rides home, and built something powerful beneath the radar of everyone I knew. When my first big contract came through, signing a lucrative retainer with a multinational corporation, I sat alone in my tiny studio apartment, silently cheering, tears streaming down my face in triumph. My success grew rapidly, each new client fueling an empire I'd never openly discussed. Soon my income eclipsed everything I'd ever imagined. But instead of celebrating, I quietly funneled money into my parents' lives, paying off their mortgage, their cars, and even funding extravagant vacations disguised as unexpected windfalls. I hoped, perhaps naively, that easing their financial burdens might finally earn me recognition or gratitude, or maybe even just genuine affection. Yet the more I gave, the more they expected. Nolan's reckless spending and mounting debts began arriving on my doorstep with alarming regularity, demands thinly disguised as urgent family emergencies. My resentment grew alongside my hidden empire, each dollar transferred to them, feeling increasingly like chains tightening around me. It was as if the success I'd built to prove my worth had trapped me deeper in the cycle of their entitlement. Despite it all, I remained silent. I kept my growing frustration hidden behind tight smiles and quiet payments, terrified of losing even the scraps of conditional approval they tossed my way. Until that Sunday dinner forced my hand and shattered every careful facade I'd ever constructed. This brings me to the eve of judgment, the dreaded family dinner I'd silently been preparing for, mentally bracing myself for days. It wasn't just another Sunday gathering, it was our annual tradition. Equal parts celebration and scrutiny, where success and failure were casually dissected between bites of roast chicken and passive-aggressive smiles. Ironically, just hours before the dinner, I was finalizing the most important business deal of my career, a merger that would officially catapult my consulting firm into global recognition. The kind of success I'd quietly dreamed of for years, and yet couldn't openly share with anyone in my family. The cruel irony wasn't lost on me. In one part of my life, I was about to be applauded by the world's most respected financial minds. In the other, I was preparing to endure another evening of criticism from the very people I'd secretly supported for so long. As I stood before my mirror, carefully smoothing wrinkles from my shirt, anxiety tightened in my chest. My phone buzzed softly, a text from my assistant. "Dana, the contract signing is tonight. Everything is set. You did it." I stared at the message, a bittersweet surge of pride warring with the dread pooling in my stomach. Tonight should have been mine, a victory lap after years of quiet sacrifice. Instead, I was headed toward judgment, armed only with a practiced smile and carefully rehearsed patience. On the drive to my parents' house, familiar suburban streets blurred past, each landmark a painful reminder of sacrifices I'd made over the years. Nolan's car, a sleek sports model I'd unknowingly paid for, was parked ostentatiously in the driveway, gleaming in the fading sunlight like a polished insult. My heart sank. How many of my payments had gone into fueling his entitled lifestyle? I hesitated briefly at the door, summoning the strength to endure whatever awaited inside. Yet, beneath the resignation simmered a quiet, unspoken promise. Tonight would be different. The careful balance I'd maintained for years was dangerously close to tipping, and deep down, part of me wondered if that wasn't exactly what I'd been waiting for all along. Drawing a breath, I stepped inside, ready, or so I believed, to face whatever came next. The table was impeccably set, candlelight flickering warmly against polished silverware, mocking me with its deceptive glow. Mom smiled thinly, offering a brittle hug, her eyes flickering over my simple clothes with practiced disdain. "Oh, Dana, always keeping things casual, I see," she remarked, smoothing non-existent wrinkles from my shirt sleeve. Nolan lounged comfortably at the table, barely looking up from his phone, radiating a bored confidence I'd never been allowed to feel. Dinner unfolded predictably. Dad inquired politely but dismissively about my little job, his tone clearly indicating he'd already decided it wasn't worth discussing. When I tried to share details of the new project, he quickly redirected the conversation toward Nolan's recent promotion, which was really just him getting a slightly less menial role at his friend's startup. "He's really stepping up," Dad declared proudly, raising his glass. Nolan smirked, soaking in the admiration like sunshine. Mom's voice cut sharply through the chatter. "Dana, I noticed the mortgage payment hasn't gone through yet. Is everything all right?" Her gaze narrowed, suspicion threaded through her words. "It's fine," I replied evenly. "I've just been reevaluating a few things." Nolan snorted, finally looking up from his phone. What's there to evaluate? It's not like you have much else going on besides work. Laughter echoed softly around the table, fueling a bitter ache in my chest. Years of silently absorbing these blows surged to the surface. Still, I held my composure, refusing to give them the satisfaction of seeing me rattled. Oh, Dana, Mom sighed theatrically, passing the vegetables. We appreciate your help, of course, but at your age, shouldn't you be focused on something more fulfilling? Family, perhaps? The question hung heavily in the air, judgment cloaked as concern. Nolan chuckled again, and Dad nodded solemnly, silently reinforcing her subtle condemnation. My patience frayed thread by thread, but before I could respond, Nolan leaned forward, eyes glinting mischievously. By the way, sis, could you spot me another few thousand? Had a rough weekend in Vegas. Bad luck. My fingers tightened around the fork, knuckles white. His casual entitlement sent a wave of nausea through me. It took everything in me not to erupt right then, at that perfectly set table filled with imperfect truths. Instead, I met his gaze steadily, and said clearly for perhaps the first time ever, no. The silence that followed was deafening. For several tense moments no one spoke. Nolan's confident smirk faltered, disbelief flickering in his eyes. Mom's mouth opened and closed like a startled fish, the practiced charm wiped clean from her face. Dad looked at me, confusion turning quickly into quiet anger. What did you say? Nolan finally sputtered, his voice shaking with incredulity. I said no, I repeated calmly, my voice steady despite the storm raging within. I'm not your personal bank. Mom slammed her fork down with theatrical outrage. Dana, how dare you speak to your brother that way? He's your family. If he needs help, you should be honored to give it. The absurdity of her words cut deep, tearing at my carefully maintained composure. Honored? I echoed, incredulous. I've paid your mortgage, funded your vacations, and cleaned up every mess Nolan ever made. When does it end? Dad leaned forward, his voice ominously quiet. It ends when we say it does. Family takes care of family, Dana. If you refuse, perhaps you're not really part of this family anymore. His threat echoed through the dining room, the air thickening around me, each word landing like a hammer blow. My heartbeat thundered in my ears as I processed the cold declaration. Despite all I'd given, in one moment of defiance, I was disposable. Nolan shifted awkwardly, his entitlement replaced momentarily by discomfort. But Mom rallied quickly, pushing back her chair and standing abruptly. It's settled then, she said bitterly, eyes blazing with dramatic finality. If you won't support your brother, if you refuse to show basic loyalty, then you're no longer welcome here. Her words, ruthless and uncompromising, hung heavy in the room. I glanced around, absorbing the faces of my family, faces filled not with love or regret, but irritation and self-righteous indignation. The family I'd quietly sustained had swiftly and mercilessly disowned me the moment my generosity had limits. Yet, in the midst of the humiliation, beneath the sting of rejection, a small part of me stirred awake. This confrontation, painful as it was, felt like liberation, a chance to finally stop living under their manipulative expectations. I stood slowly, meeting their collective glare with quiet dignity. If that's how you feel, I won't fight it, I replied, steady and calm, though inside I trembled. Maybe it's time I stopped paying for the privilege of being your daughter. Without another word I turned, leaving behind a table full of shock and silence. The harsh chill of evening air stung my skin as I stood outside my parents' house, trying to steady my trembling hands. I'd never openly defied them before, not like this. I was accustomed to quiet rebellion, hidden beneath careful smiles and silent payments. But tonight, I'd ripped away every mask, leaving raw truths exposed, and now the weight of what I'd done settled heavily in my chest. Suddenly, my phone buzzed insistently, startling me from my swirling thoughts. I fumbled for it, glancing quickly at the glowing screen. My assistant's name flashed urgently, causing my heartbeat to spike. Hello? I answered, voice barely steady. Dana! Her excitement burst through the speaker, almost too loud in the silence of the driveway. The merger is official. They signed early, it's all over the news already, your company is everywhere. The breath caught in my throat, the reality of her words washing over me in dizzying waves. My quiet empire was quiet no more. It was out in the open, blazing like a beacon for everyone, my family included, to see. I managed, my voice faint as emotion choked me. Thank you for calling. As if on cue, The door behind me swung open, revealing Nolan standing awkwardly in the doorway, eyes wide with disbelief as he stared down at his phone screen, illuminated by breaking news alerts. Behind him, I saw Mom and Dad scrambling toward the front door, their faces reflecting a sudden panic. "Dana," Nolan stammered, voice hollow, "your company's worth millions." Before I could respond, Mom burst forward, eyes wild with shock and an unsettling desperation. "Dana, honey," she breathed, suddenly tender. "Why didn't you tell us? You're a huge success." The sickening sweetness of her words, so starkly contrasted with her cold dismissal mere minutes earlier, was nauseating. Dad stood awkwardly behind her, shifting from foot to foot, unable to meet my gaze. You've done so much, we had no idea," he muttered awkwardly, embarrassment painting his face. "Come back inside, we can talk this over." Their sudden kindness, their transparent greed, twisted something fierce and painful inside me. The hypocrisy was staggering, blatant, and deeply revealing. I took a step back, grounding myself in the quiet strength I'd found only moments earlier. "No," I said softly, clearly, letting the single word echo gently into the tense night air. "I think I've heard enough." Their stunned silence followed me, thick with unspoken confusion, as I turned away from the home I'd funded yet never truly belonged in. Mom's voice broke through suddenly, desperation clawing through her pride. "Dana, wait." Her tone cracked, losing its polished veneer. "We didn't mean what we said, we were upset. We had no idea you'd done so much." I stopped, turning slowly to face them, calm but unyielding. "You did know," I said gently, feeling strangely at peace as the truth spilled out. "You've always known, and that's exactly the problem. You took every dime, every sacrifice, every ounce of kindness for granted, and when I finally set a boundary, just one, you tossed me aside like I was worthless." Dad shifted uncomfortably, shame clouding his face. Nolan opened his mouth to protest, but I held up a hand, silencing him instantly. "No, Nolan, you've said enough for a lifetime," I said, meeting his stunned eyes without flinching. "All of you made your choice tonight. You chose to disown me when I stopped paying your way. Now that you've seen dollar signs, suddenly I'm worth your love again?" Mom's eyes filled with tears. Whether genuine or manipulative, I didn't care anymore. "Dana, please," she whispered, almost broken. I shook my head firmly, stepping further away. "I can't keep buying your love. Family shouldn't have a price tag." The quiet impact of my words hung heavily between us. For once, no one rushed to fill the silence. Their shock, their shame, their desperation. I saw it all clearly now, and it couldn't reach me anymore. "You'll regret this," Nolan finally muttered bitterly, his voice tight with anger. "I doubt it," I replied simply, a calm strength filling every word. "I've spent a lifetime quietly regretting every compromise I made for your approval. Tonight, I reclaim my life, my dignity, and my happiness." Turning away, my footsteps carried me confidently down the driveway, each step distancing me from their toxic expectations. The cool night air was cleansing, invigorating. Behind me, the house I'd funded stood silent, a symbol of every painful compromise I'd endured for approval that would never truly come. Tonight, I had finally chosen myself, and for the first time I felt utterly free. The drive from my parents' house felt surreal, adrenaline still pulsing through my veins. As the city lights blurred past, a newfound clarity settled over me. For the first time in my life, I wasn't driving away with guilt weighing me down. Instead, I felt strangely weightless, liberated. When I arrived at my friend Jolene's place, she opened the door with a knowing smile, immediately pulling me into a tight hug. "You survived," she whispered gently, squeezing my shoulders. Inside, Jolene had already gathered our closest friends who greeted me warmly, their faces lit with genuine pride. To Dana, Jolene raised a glass triumphantly, her voice carrying real affection. "Our brilliant, unstoppable friend, it's about damn time the world knew what we've always known." Laughter and cheers filled the cozy room, and warmth flooded through me, chasing away the lingering chill of family rejection. Surrounded by genuine support, I felt something powerful shift deep inside. Here, among my chosen family, there was no hidden cost, no secret obligations, only authentic love, freely given and sincerely felt. As we celebrated, Jolene quietly drew me aside. "Are you okay?" she asked, concern softening her eyes. I nodded slowly, smiling warmly. "Honestly, better than ever. I thought tonight would break me, but instead it woke me up." She squeezed my hand reassuringly. "Good, Remember, Dana, family isn't always blood. Sometimes the family you choose is far stronger. Later, as the evening softened into laughter-filled conversations and easy warmth, I felt an overwhelming sense of belonging. Unlike the stiff tension at the dinner table, this space felt effortless, genuine, safe. These people had stood by me through quiet triumphs and silent struggles, never demanding more than I could give, never taking my love for granted. In that quiet moment of reflection, I understood clearly the stark contrast between blood ties and genuine bonds. One had drained me endlessly, demanding constant sacrifice. The other filled me up, generously offering strength without condition. For years, I'd confused obligation with love, but tonight, finally freed from my family's manipulative expectations, I knew exactly where my true family belonged. Right here, in this room full of laughter and warmth, I'd finally found my place, accepted exactly as I was, without needing to prove anything more. In the days that followed, reality settled back in, bringing with it the uncomfortable aftermath of my family's dramatic meltdown. Predictably, my phone lit up incessantly, flooded with calls and texts. My parents offering insincere apologies laced with subtle pleas for renewed financial support, Nolan alternating between indignation and desperate bargaining. Each message felt like an attempt to claw back control, tugging relentlessly at the edges of my resolve. But something within me had fundamentally shifted. The fragile, tentative boundaries I'd once maintained were no longer sufficient. It was time for clear, unwavering rules, lines drawn with intention, reinforced by the strength I'd rediscovered in myself. My response was straightforward, firm, and non-negotiable. I informed them that I would no longer fund their lifestyle, debts, or excesses. My generosity had reached its limit. If they wanted any relationship with me moving forward, it would be built on mutual respect, not transactional manipulation. Their reactions were swift and furious. Mom accused me of cruelty, her messages punctuated with theatrical sobs. Dad voiced stern disapproval, attempting to shame me into submission. Nolan lashed out bitterly, blaming me for his failures and threats of total estrangement if I refused to help. Yet, rather than shaking my resolve, their outbursts solidified it. Every toxic word, every guilt-ridden manipulation only strengthened my newfound clarity. For the first time in my life, I truly saw them. Their demands, their selfishness, their refusal to accept responsibility, and chose peace over their chaos. I began implementing practical steps, blocking their calls, redirecting their emails, and quietly severing financial ties completely. Boundaries once soft and permeable became concrete fortifications, protecting my energy, time, and heart from further exploitation. With each boundary established, I felt lighter, freer, as though every decision moved me closer to the life I'd always deserved, but never dared to claim. My chosen family, friends like Jolene and colleagues who supported me, stood firmly beside me, reinforcing my decisions with unwavering encouragement. As I navigated this newfound independence, I learned the most profound lesson of all. Boundaries aren't merely defensive walls but affirmations of self-worth. Every line I drew, every boundary reinforced, declared loudly and unequivocally that my value was non-negotiable, and that love, real, authentic love, should never come with conditions. Finally, free from my family's manipulations, I was ready to reclaim my life on my own terms. With my family's expectations firmly behind me, I turned my energy toward creating something meaningful, something that would redefine the legacy of my name. The immense success I'd quietly built finally had purpose beyond quiet rebellion or familial obligation. I could use it as a force for genuine good. Inspired by my own journey and the silent struggles I'd endured for years, I launched a foundation dedicated to empowering young women pursuing careers in finance and entrepreneurship, women who, like me, had often felt invisible or overlooked. The foundation offered scholarships, mentorship programs, and workshops to nurture talent and amplify the voices that deserved recognition but rarely received it. At the grand opening event, surrounded by friends, colleagues, and an enthusiastic community, I stepped onto the stage feeling strangely calm, deeply aware of the significance of this moment. "My name is Dana," I began, voice steady yet vibrant with emotion. For most of my life, I thought success meant earning approval from those unwilling to give it. I spent years quietly striving, silently paying the price for love I believed had to be earned. But tonight, I stand before you realizing success is something deeper, It's about finding your purpose, sharing your strength, and lifting others so they never feel invisible. Applause erupted warmly around me, but my eyes caught Jolene's supportive smile in the crowd. She understood the quiet victory this moment represented. The power I'd once sacrificed to appease others was now fully mine again, used deliberately, compassionately, and authentically. As I stepped off stage, young women approached, faces bright with hope and gratitude, sharing their dreams and struggles openly. Each conversation reinforced the clarity of my mission, filling my heart with purpose that no family judgment could diminish. News of my foundation's launch spread widely, bringing recognition, not for wealth or status, but for genuine impact. In a surprising twist, my parents attempted to reconnect again, their messages softened by what felt, finally, like real respect. But this time my response was gentle yet unwavering, forgiveness without compromise. I could let go of resentment without reopening doors I'd intentionally closed. By reclaiming my family name on my own terms, building a legacy grounded in authenticity, empowerment, and compassion, I turned my pain into purpose, rewriting the story they'd tried so hard to define. And in doing so, I discovered a freedom far greater than anything I'd ever imagined. Looking back on everything, the quiet years of sacrifice, the relentless pursuit of approval, and the explosive night of reckoning, I finally understood something fundamental. My worth had never hinged on their validation. All along, the validation I craved most deeply had always been mine to give. It took decades, countless disappointments, and one unforgettable family dinner to fully grasp that truth. But once discovered, it changed everything. The bitterness I'd carried quietly, buried beneath smiles and silent payments, dissolved, replaced by genuine compassion for the flawed people who raised me, people who were products of their own insecurities, trapped in cycles they'd never found the courage to break. In releasing the expectation of their approval, I'd reclaimed my power, stepping fully into the person I'd always wanted to be, someone guided by integrity, kindness, and a clear sense of purpose. Someone free of transactional love and conditional acceptance. Someone who defined success on her own terms. Now, when I wake up each morning, I feel a deep sense of peace, one that's entirely my own creation. It's rooted in the decisions I've made, the boundaries I've set, and the relationships I've chosen to nurture. This peace isn't fragile or fleeting, it's strong, resilient, and unshakable, because it doesn't depend on anyone else's acknowledgement. The life I've built since stepping away from their demands isn't perfect. No life ever is. But it's authentic. It's mine. Every choice a reflection of self-respect, every relationship rooted in sincerity, every success a quiet celebration of personal integrity. Standing confidently in this truth, I finally understand. Self-worth isn't something others can grant or take away. It's internal, powerful, and entirely within our control. And for the first time ever, I don't just know this intellectually, I feel it in every cell of my body. My name is Dana, and my value needs no external validation. I've found my peace, and no one can take that away from me. Have you ever felt like your worth depended on someone else's approval? Have you struggled to set boundaries or break free from relationships rooted in obligation instead of genuine connection? I'd love to hear your stories. Share them with me in the comments below. If my journey resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear that it's okay to define success on their own terms. Remember, your worth isn't something you have to earn, it's something you have the power to recognize and claim. You don't have to prove your value to anyone. Not your family, not your friends, not the world. You're enough exactly as you are, right now. Thank you for watching, and until next time, take care and trust in your own worth. You deserve peace.